Picture this. It's March 11, 2011, exactly 2:46 p.m., and everything in Japan is perfectly normal. People are at work, kids are in school, trains are running on time. But over the next 6 minutes, the Earth is going to do something completely unprecedented in modern history, triggering not just one, but 3 consecutive mega-disasters that will bring the most prepared country on Earth to its knees.
$360 billion. I just want to let that staggering number sink in for a second. That is the cost of the most expensive natural disaster in human history. To put that into perspective, $360 billion could fund the entire annual budgets of several nations or launch multiple missions to the moon. It's an absolutely devastating sum, and it all escalated in just 6 minutes on what started as a completely ordinary afternoon. So how exactly did a nation so famous for its advanced technology suffer such unimaginable loss? Let's dive in.
Part 1. Japan's Fortress Against Nature. Before we get into the chaos, we really need to understand the incredible baseline of preparedness Japan had built up.
10,500. That is the number of earthquakes Japan experiences every single year. Basically, that's about 4 earthquakes a day. For Japanese citizens, the ground shaking is, well, it's as normal as a brief power outage might be to the rest of the world. It's just an everyday reality. Because of this constant seismic threat, Japan had essentially built a fortress against nature. They engineered their entire society to withstand the earth moving right beneath their feet. We're talking massive skyscrapers literally sitting on gigantic springs and shock absorbers to soak up the tremors. Schools ran mandatory earthquake drills every single month, and they had developed the world's fastest early warning system, capable of pinging every TV and mobile phones seconds before the shaking even started. They were as ready as a nation could possibly be.
Part 2. History's biggest earthquake. At 2:46 p.m., nature unleashed a force that defied all scientific imagination and tested that fortress to its absolute limits.
Now, this wasn't your typical 30-second tremor. For hundreds of years, the Pacific tectonic plate had been wedging itself under Japan at about 8 centimeters a year, which is roughly the speed your fingernails grow. It got stuck, building up this immense, unimaginable pressure, like a giant stretched rubber band, and at 2:46 p.m., that rubber band violently snapped. This single release subjected Japan to 6 agonizing minutes of a magnitude 9.1 earthquake, making it the 4th most powerful earthquake in recorded history. The scale of this energy is almost incomprehensible. It was equivalent to thousands of atomic bombs going off all at once. It was so violent that it physically altered the Earth's position in space. No, really. The planet's axis actually shifted by 17 centimeters. Japan's main island of Honshu was physically shoved 2.4 meters to the east. It even sped up the Earth's rotation, permanently making our days 1.8 microseconds shorter. This single event quite literally altered time itself.
In those first few terrifying minutes, as massive buildings violently swayed but held firm, it almost seemed like human engineering had won. The early warning system? It worked flawlessly. 27 bullet trains, screaming along at 300 kilometers per hour, safely auto-braked without a single derailment. So when the shaking finally stopped after 6 minutes, people took a collective breath. The building stood, the system worked.
Part 3. Tsunami, an invisible monster. The real nightmare, though, wasn't on land at all.
When the ocean force snapped upward by several meters, it displaced billions of tons of water. Now, the word tsunami is often misunderstood as just a big wave. But unlike a surface wave pushed by the wind, a tsunami involves the entire depth of the ocean moving all at once. If a normal wave is like a single push, a tsunami is like an entire crowd falling on you at the same time. Out in the deep ocean, this invisible monster was traveling at the speed of a commercial jet plane, up to 800 kilometers an hour, racing straight toward a population that had only 30 minutes to react.
I really want you to put yourself in their shoes and imagine the panic. The clock is ticking down. With just 30 minutes left, what is the one thing you grab before you run? Just 3 minutes after the earthquake, the tsunami warnings went out. But something went terribly, terribly wrong with how those warnings were interpreted.
Tragically, the initial warnings flashing on TV screens only predicted 6-meter-high waves. This gave people a fatal false sense of security. They looked out at the ocean, and the white line on the horizon was just growing thicker by the second. When it finally hit, it was not 6 meters. In some areas, it was 15 meters, and near Miyako, the water actually funneled up the hills to an astonishing 40 meters high. You guys, that is the height of a 13-story building. People had placed all their unwavering faith in their massive concrete coastal defenses. These 10-meter-high seawalls, jokingly called the Great Wall of Japan, had protected them for decades.
But that day, the ocean simply swallowed them. The tsunami rolled right over them like they didn't even exist, breaking apart thousands of tons of concrete blocks and turning their trusted defenses into deadly projectiles that just crushed the cities right behind them.
Roughly 20,000 lives were lost to that black water, which proved far deadlier than the earthquake itself. But amidst the horror, there were some incredible acts of heroism. Take 24-year-old Miki Endo. She stayed at her post in the disaster center, broadcasting warnings over the loudspeaker right up until the very end, pleading with people to run to higher ground. Her voice saved thousands of lives, even though she tragically lost her own when the water engulfed her building.
Part 4. Fukushima Station Blackout. The earthquake and the tsunami were utterly devastating, basically wiping entire towns off the map. But the third, most terrifying catastrophe was just beginning at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant.
To understand what happened to Fukushima, think of a nuclear reactor as a giant pressure cooker. Even when it's safely shut down, the nuclear fuel stays unimaginably hot and needs constant cooling. Now, the plant actually survived the earthquake perfectly. It shut down its active reactors exactly as designed, but its 10-meter seawall was completely defenseless against a 14-meter tsunami. The water smashed through the defenses and catastrophically flooded the basement, which is exactly where the emergency backup diesel generators were located. With those generators flooded, this highly advanced plant suddenly plunged into total darkness. They suffered a station blackout, literally the most terrifying phrase in nuclear engineering. With zero power, cooling completely stopped. The water inside boiled into vapor, exposing the uranium fuel rods. In a nation famous for advanced robotics and bullet trains, engineers were suddenly reduced to scavenging car batteries and reading pressure gauges with flashlights. The reactors began to melt down, producing highly explosive hydrogen gas that soon blew the roofs right off the reactor buildings.
As radiation started leaking, the government evacuated over 150,000 people from a 20-kilometer radius, but a brave group of about 50 workers, now famously known as the Fukushima 50, stayed behind in the radioactive dark. Plant manager Masayo Shida made the agonizing call to pump raw seawater directly into the reactors. It meant permanently destroying billions of dollars of equipment, but it was the only way left to cool the melting fuel. They risked their lives to prevent a second Chernobyl, and remarkably, direct deaths from radiation exposure during the disaster were effectively zero.
Part 5. A new beginning from debris. The triple disaster left behind 25 million tons of wreckage. That is enough to build an entirely new city. But what Japan did next is a true testament to the indomitable human spirit.
The speed of their recovery was just unbelievable. You might remember the viral pictures of the completely shattered Great Kanto Highway. Well, just 6 days later, Japanese engineers had perfectly repaired it. Sendai Airport, which literally had cars floating on its runways, was back to operating flights within a month. Bullet trains were running again in 49 days. And they weren't alone. Global support poured in, including the Indian NDRF's first ever overseas rescue mission, deploying 46 personnel to assist in the ravaged town of Onagawa.
Japan didn't just rebuild what was lost. They learned from their devastating defeat. They totally overhauled their defenses, constructing 400 kilometers of new, even taller seawalls. They implemented far stricter safety protocols across all nuclear sites. At Fukushima, engineers pulled off a modern marvel. They built a massive, underground ice wall by freezing the ground to stop groundwater from mixing with radioactive zones. And today, advanced robots go where humans can't safely venture for another century, slowly executing a cleanup that's going to take up to 40 years.
Amidst all the engineering marvels and rapid rebuilding, perhaps the most profound symbol of recovery came from nature itself. In the coastal city of Rikuzen, Kitata, there used to be a beautiful forest of 70,000 pine trees. The tsunami completely wiped out 69,999 of them. Exactly one single tree remains standing. Japan named it the Miracle Pine, preserving it as this powerful monument, proof that even when nearly everything is lost, something always remains to start anew.
And that brings us to the ultimate lesson of the 2011 triple disaster. By 2021, the Olympic torch relay kicked off its journey right in Fukushima, sending a powerful message to the world that a land once thought permanently ruined had sprung back to life. Look, human engineering will always have its limits against the raw, awe-inspiring power of nature. The walls we build can always be overtopped. But as we watch Japan's remarkable journey back from the ashes of $360 billion in devastation, it really leaves us with one question. When all your defenses fail and life sends its own invisible tsunamis your way, how will you find the resilience to stand back up?